I got to get to risk number two, and they're interrelated on all these concepts. I mean, you're talking about technology, that of course plays into China and the US and that interaction, and it does play into risk number two overall on a much bigger macro level, which is the second biggest risk of 2023, which is maximum Xi. Of course, that is China and the most powerful leader since Mao, of course, Xi Jinping. What are the risks posed by China with this new remarkably powerful leader? Let's bring in Anna Ashton, Director of China Corporate Affairs and the US-China team at Eurasia Group. Happy New Year to you, Anna. China topped the list last year. It was number one top risk as the nation's economy stood on shaky ground thanks to the zero COVID policy, which is a huge issue now. This year, the risk seems less focused on policy and more on personality, and Xi Jinping, the term EG is using, maximum Xi. What does that term mean? And what, Anna, are the risks associated with maximum Xi?
Thanks, Evan. So basically the risks boil down to maximum impunity and maximum potential mistakes. When the 20th Party Congress was held last October, what became clear was that Xi Jinping has now succeeded in consolidating power like no one else in recent Chinese history, like few in the world, frankly. He's amassed power to an extent not achieved by any other modern Chinese leader except for Mao. And his command of the country is basically unrivaled. He's seated all of the top leadership posts with his own allies who are unlikely to push back on his decisions. He's going to be able to get a lot done a lot faster. Among his goals, we know, will for sure be continuing to build out the party's influence over government, business, the economy, and that may or may not always be a good thing. The big risk is that he's also less fettered in his ability to make miscalculations and mistakes. We already see that playing out with the sudden end of zero COVID. If Xi had a theme song right now, it'd be Drake's 0 to 100. I mean, this pivot out of zero COVID was deeply desired by many in China, but it has been really quick. And yes, maybe the outbreak was inevitable, but what people are asking is, where's the stockpile of antivirals? Where was the vaccine campaign to prepare for that inevitable outbreak? So that's a prime example of this increased risk of Xi making policy mistakes. And now he's operating with fewer constraints than ever, without checks and balances in place, without an opposition faction to contend with, and surrounded by political allies who are likely to be yes men. So his recognition of mistakes and his steps to course correct may also be delayed.
Okay, you're dropping the Drake songs too. I thought you were Drake starting from the bottom, but I like how you also dropped that Drake song too. What about domestically? Does she pose domestically? I mean, we'll get to foreign policy and the wolf diplomacy in a minute. Any real threat? I mean, we've seen these remarkable protests. Are we overplaying the notion that this is zero COVID and the protests may signal any potential change or threat to Xi's power?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a real temptation in Western media to look at the protests that we saw several weeks ago over frustration with the zero COVID policies and think that there was some groundswell of opposition to Xi that was being made manifest, but that's just not the case. There's really not much risk of a revolution or sweeping political change in China right now. The reality, as I said, is Xi Jinping has built a lot of safeguards into the system through his expansion of power and his expansion of control. And there's not an opposition faction with any real power right now that could be sort of pushed into action to organize a resistance movement or an ousting of Xi Jinping. And I think on top of that, it's important to remember that revolution also comes when life is getting worse, not better. And the idea that life is getting worse in China is something that only describes China in the narrowest of terms. Yes, COVID is bad. Yes, China's economy has slowed considerably over the course of COVID, but for most of the time that she's been in power, and he's been in power for more than a decade now, China has clearly thrived, and he's cultivated and shown that he can effectively rally strong nationalistic sentiments as well. So there's nothing in the cards right now that makes it look like a revolution is likely.